Hello everybody, this is Brian O'Haron. This is the 10th program in Planning for Success. What I'm trying to achieve here is to try to show the people in the town how to manage the town like a business. And we've made some progress so far. We have a long way to go. So here we go with number 10. In the backdrop tonight, we of course have to think about Thanksgiving. The program will be on today at the time you're watching, 5 o'clock. I recorded a little bit earlier than that. And then it'll be repeated tomorrow night at 9 o'clock from 9 to 10, Tuesday night, the 20th of November. And then we will be switching to Friday night, beginning on November 30th at 8 p.m., which I think is probably the best time slot. That's why I chose that. So there are people here who were very cooperative. The chips fell the right way, and after this week, next Friday, we'll be on at from 8 to 9 p.m. for the 13 weeks. And hopefully afterwards, if we can arrange it with the station. I'd just like to talk a bit about Thanksgiving while I have this nice picture up back of me that I got from the internet. When I went to Kansas, there were a lot of Indians in Kansas, American Indians, mostly from all over the country. And part of the reason for that was that in Lawrence, Kansas, where the university is, was a high school called Haskell. It was an Indian school, and Indians came from all over the country, mainly Oklahoma and out west type areas, but they came all over to be at Haskell. And one of the graduates of Haskell was the great Billy Mills. Now, when I was in Kansas, Billy Mills was the long distance runner on the United States Championship, college championship track team, coached by Bill Easton. He went down to Haskell, he saw Billy Mills, and he picked him up, and Billy Mills ran for the Kansas track team. When I was there, I knew Billy. We weren't great friends, but we did know each other, and my wife was friends with his wife once he got married. Billy was Lakota Sioux Indian, grew up on a Sioux reservation in Oklahoma. And when I moved into an apartment out of the dorm, I knew Billy when I was in the dorm. When I moved out of the apartment, out of the dorm into the apartment, I didn't see much of Billy anymore. And then when I was working down at Navy Tactical Defense System down in Glencoe, Georgia, Joyce and I were living down there for a while, he was involved with the Marine Corps. And they had Wes Santee was down there, and he was also from Kansas. And he pointed out to the Marines that they had a great runner in their midst, because Billy had joined the Marine Corps in the early 60s. And they picked up on Billy, and he continued to train. And when we were in Phoenix, Arizona, working at the Air Force Defense System, we saw on TV where Billy won the 10,000 meters in the Olympic Games. I think it was in Japan. So anyway, I'm very proud of that. There's a movie called Running Brave where you can see that. Now, when I was at Kansas, Billy couldn't get into a fraternity because he was Indian, and that was to my advantage because he couldn't get into the fraternity. He got into the dorm, and we got to know each other, and he was a very positive influence, very, very good decision type person, and trained very, very hard. So I really respect the Indians, the American Indians. We learned a lot from them. When I first went to England, I said, hey, I'd like to have some corn at a restaurant. They said, we don't eat corn in England. That's for the cows. We feed that to the cattle. And I said, well, we learned to eat corn from the American Indians in the East Coast of the United States, and we kind of like corn. I think today they eat more corn over there for one reason or another, but I always thought that was an interesting story. So we learned a lot from the American Indians. They were a great part of our heritage. And obviously the settlers and the Indians in the earlier days, at least, got along well together, and they sat down at a dinner table. So it kind of goes with what I'm trying to achieve here in Winsted, is getting everybody to sit down and talk to each other and work together and try to make this for success. So everybody, we got our house full on Thanksgiving. I'm sure you do too. Let's have a happy Thanksgiving, and then we'll be back on next week to pursue our objectives. If you can now point to the agenda, Christine, thank you. The agenda for tonight, I'll make some comments. They'll be a little longer than usual tonight. There is a selectmen's meeting tonight, and this is being on the air before the selectmen's meeting, so it won't have any information at all from that meeting. That'll come next week. and I'll, of course, also have a chance to digest it for a week, so that kind of goes well with me. So there'll be comments, and then I'll give a short financial update. Not a lot has happened in the last week or so on that. Then I'll just flash up the major progress status board, the major decision status board, because no major progress or decisions publicly have been acknowledged during the week. Maybe more will happen tonight at the selectmen meeting, but so that's just to remind you that we're going to be looking at that every week. I did contact the Democrats to see if they had anything they wanted to put up on this board, and as yet, I don't have anything to add. But if I do get anything, I will add it to the board. But I wouldn't do it without their permission. And then I'm going to put up a new slide, which is going to be blank this week. But in the long run, it's going to be the most critical slide of all, and that's going to be called instrumentation. And I don't even think I've got it spelled right there, so forgive me for that. Instrumentation is key. And one day when I was working in New York at NYNEX phone company, one of the ladies that was there for 30 or 40 years when I joined the company said, "Brian, if you were an American Indian, they would call you he who flies by instruments." Because I like to fly by instruments. I like to know, where I'm going, how much gas is in the car, how fast is it going, how many miles per hour, etc. So that's called instrumentation. So to run our business, we need instrumentation, and we need to keep an eye on that instrumentation at all times, and then react when we see the instruments diving for zero or something like that. So we do have to take, now as you know, cars today are very well instrumented, and they tell you everything. If your little gas door is open, they'll tell you your gas door is open. So almost everything is instrumented on an automobile today, and an airplane even more so. So we need to do that with the town, so I'm going to just introduce that idea today. And then I got a few notices, mainly on the reval, some things about that. And then I'm going to just mention Pearson School shortly. And then most of the time will be spent on expediting the solution, which is the meat of this program tonight. So now we'll just put this comments thing up so you can see that it is comments. And then if you can point back to me, I'll just talk about the comments. I'm not going to put the comments up on the board tonight. So thank you. Well, as far as my comments are concerned, the first thing I want to point out is somebody did let me know this week that it's not a state requirement that we have X number of people on the Board of Education. We can have less if we want to. It's a charter restriction, evidently. So pending somebody proving otherwise, we can change the charter of the Board of Selectmen, I'm sorry, of the Board of Education, and make it smaller and more flexible. I did notice that the Gilbert School was trying in the last X months to streamline their operation a bit up there, and for one reason or another, the outside board members didn't agree with them. I wholeheartedly agree with them. I think they should slim that down the way Mr. Cressy wants to do it and make it more effective in a business-like manner. And it'll be a lot easier to run the thing. It'll be a lot more professional and business-like. And the instrumentation, the information should be flowing anyway, whether you have 10 meetings or 2. And whether you have X number at the meetings or Y number at the meetings. That shouldn't affect the flow of information, as we're going to talk about for our own town. We are now in intensive care. We talked a lot about doctors and surgeons before the election, and well, the businessmen are here, and we are now in intensive care. We're in intensive care, unfortunately, and we will be for 4 or 5 years. As you know from the sheets I produced on future revenues, we're a long way off from having enough money to do anything. So almost everywhere I go in town, especially in the last few weeks, everywhere I go, when I ask why aren't we implementing these plans, why aren't we doing this or that, it's always money at the root of it all. Now, Brian didn't invent money. Right? Money is the way we do transact things in this world, especially in this country. So without money, it's kind of hard to do anything. And everywhere you go, people say, well, we can't do anything. We don't have any money. So it's going to take 4 or 5 years, as I see it, if all goes well, to be able to have enough money so that we can plan properly and execute properly in a business-like manner. And we're going to have a rough time getting there. And it'll take longer if we don't do the right things along the way, and we don't manage like a business. And just like in the intensive care unit, we'll need instrumentation to monitor our condition as we progress through intensive care. So if you've ever been in the intensive care unit or gone there to see somebody else, you see all kinds of wires, hooked up. My first granddaughter, was born prematurely. I think she was 4 pounds in one of the best areas to be born prematurely, Houston, Texas, where they have one of the best premature labs in the country. And when I went there to see her when she was born, she was wired up like you wouldn't believe. They had probably 50 wires attached to her one way or another and monitored everything. Now she's one of the tallest girls in her class, and she's quite healthy, and you'd have never known she was born at 4 pounds. But anyway, we need instrumentation. We'll talk quite a bit about that over time. Now, I will seek the information necessary for this instrumentation from the town and encourage them to build it into the regular management reporting system. Just like in the intensive care unit, it needs to be there all the time. And you'll hear little beeps and little this and little that. And then when the bell rings, the nurses run in or the doctors run in, and sometimes they have to call an expert. And that's why they call it intensive care. Now, one of the things that's kind of important here is sizing. And sizing is a technique used by all systems people and business people in determining what things are capable of. Now, I think the simplest example I can give you is a pipe. If you have a 3-inch pipe and it's 5 feet long, or no matter how long it is, you can only pump so much water through that pipe. And you can only pump so fast. If you try to pump more water through the pipe, then it will hold, it'll back up in the front, and you won't get it in the pipe. You can only apply so much pressure to the pipe because all pipes are pressure related, and if you put too much pressure on, it won't, it might break. So everything has to be sized that way. Our town is no different than that. We have to find out how much current and future capacity that we have available for additions to the town and where the bottlenecks are likely to occur. Now, right now, there are a lot of things that don't appear to be a bottleneck whatsoever, and of course that doesn't mean infinite, but water and sewer tend to be pretty well underutilized, and we do have plenty of capacity from what I hear from expert testimony at these meetings I go to. So we're a little way away from having to worry about that. On the other hand, the schools, that's another question. So what we need to do with the schools is try to get some instrumentation, find out how we're sized, and then go from there. The sizing, once complete and kept up to date, can be used to regulate and balance the approval of new additions to the town as permits are requested. Now, this is not new for the town. We already do that. So we have 95% of the time, most people can come in and they can apply for permits and one way or another get through the system. It's that 5% that causes all the interesting questions and all the controversy. So that's a 95% rule. We'll talk about that later on. I might not get to it today, but it is part of this section of the programs. Completing the sizing is not an easy exercise and will take a lot of time, probably a year or two, to be able to get the town size the way we want it, make sure it's in sync with the state and the needs of the people in town. There's a process that has to be gone through. That'll take time. In the meantime, we must use what we have coupled with the uncommon common sense. We do have a plan now for this, and people are using that until it's changed in the future. Some residents of the town I've already put out a call for statistics on the school system from almost everybody I can think of, and I've got a lot of information back from a lot of people, and where to go and look for things and where to get the statistics from websites to other places, and I will be doing that. It's going to take quite a bit of time, though, because I have to squeeze it in between other things. But I don't think there's any big rush for it. But I do think once we get all the statistics out, then nobody can argue. I mean, the facts will be there, and we can all say, just like I did with my state of the town statistics, we'll be able to see the state of the town and the schools very clearly, and then we can make decisions based upon that. Right now, there's a lot of information floating around. My view is it's not coordinated, and it's not presented in a way that the ordinary taxpayers and citizens can understand the correct problem. If you can't understand the problem, you'll always be arguing about the solution. Financial update. Switch to the financial update. Thank you. The financial update is kind of simple this week. The bond restructure, there's no new news. I did tell you last week I would try to find out when the Pearson School had to be finished because of the complaint with the state. I did not get that information this week. I couldn't reach the right people. I'm going to see some school people tomorrow, so I think I'll be able to get it for the next show. It's not really, really not critical. It is critical for the selectmen because they are putting together the plan to fix that, those problems and get them done in time so that we won't have any repercussions from the state. So that, I guess the selectmen are moving on that. As soon as they supply some information, maybe something will come out tonight at the selectmen meeting, then I'll post it here. Reevaluation is still expected in early December. We're only a few weeks away from that now. You will be getting a letter in your mailbox around the beginning of December telling you what your new value is on your property. I will talk about that in a few more minutes. The 2008-09 budget expected around June 2008, and by then we should have at least two pieces of the puzzle. We'll know revaluation, we'll know the budget, and then we just have to see how the bond issues settle down and what kind of a plan is put together for fixing the problems that we thought were pointed out in the bond issue. Now, instrumentation. I'm just putting this up prematurely now. It may never ever come to this. We may not have this in the end. But I gave out 3 different spreadsheets and with a statement of the problem that the town is, over the last 10 years, hasn't been earning any money. It's been breaking even, if not losing a bit. And we haven't been able to keep up with the needs of the town. So what I did was I put together a spreadsheet that showed over the next 15 or 16 years, if we took the 3.52% average growth that we get from taxes now mainly, and kept that for 10 more years, we'd still have zero savings. Then I also put together a spreadsheet which said, hey, if we can grow that 3.52 to 6% over the next 4 or 5 or 6 years, then we'll have some savings and we'll be able to do things and plan things, and we'll be more proactive, and we can get some of these plans that are on the shelves off the shelves and start working on them. And there are plenty of plans in town. One of the planning people told me that there's at least 7 or 8 plans for development and redevelopment that are sitting gathering dust because there's no money to implement them. And I think the town has, somebody told me in the town hall that there's roughly 30 plans sitting around. Plans aren't the problem. The money to implement those plans is the problem. And I think almost everybody agrees with that. At least I haven't found anybody who doesn't yet. And then I left here on this chart, I left a question mark because the selectmen may choose not to pick my 6% that I had, and that's their decision how they do this. They may choose not to do any of these, and that's their decision. But once I know what their plan is, then I'll replace these 3 with whatever their plan is, and we'll look at it, and we'll watch it every week and every month and every quarter for the next 4 or 5 years, to see, as long as I'm here anyway, to see how it progresses. The third one I put together was for the Grand Leap. That's getting something similar to the development into town that gives us a big jump in the tax base, as well as the growth from 3.52 to %. And I used 6 in my spreadsheet. Now, I do have a copy of the spreadsheets. If you can flash over to me for a second. John? Well, I don't know. He's not flashing over, so I'll put it up here. Okay, that's all right. That's okay, John. I got it. Here it is. This is in here. I have. This is actually not the right one, but anyway, I've got the plan. It's 3. It's a statement of the problem, and it's 3 objective spreadsheets that I made that will be updated from time to time. If any of those are adopted, we'll follow the progress. If not, the selectmen will do their own spreadsheet or their own approach to growing the town revenue, which is one of their first priorities, and then we'll follow that. So this is going to be a long, slow process, so I don't expect to see much on this chart for a while, but I do want to put it up here and let you know that we haven't forgotten it, and it's one of the key things we have to do. That's the instrumentation. That's going to tell us where we stand. We have the major status report, which is there. Yeah, it hasn't changed since last time, so I'm not going to dwell on it. We still have the important decisions sheet, and that hasn't changed since last time, so I'm not going to dwell on that. And I'm going to get on to now a bit about the Pearson School. First I wanted to talk a bit about vision appraisal. Let's talk first about vision appraisal, and that is the in the beginning of December, we are going to get our revaluation results. Now, these revaluation results may be appealed. Every one of you can appeal your revaluation result. And I would encourage you to look into it. When you get your notice, there will be a number on there for you to call. And I think it's going to be the town library, although I'm not positive about that. It'll be somewhere. And it probably won't be the assessor's office because they have to carry on with normal business. So you can call that number and you can get a copy of your vision appraisal sheet. I've got one today of mine from my property, and this is all the facts about your piece of property. And when you get this, it'll tell you everything they have on here is part of what they use to make up your taxes. So, and it also has a picture on it of your house. So usually they only have one sheet. I happen to have two because they got a complex piece of property. But if you get this, then you should check it over and make sure they got the right number of bathrooms, the right number of bedrooms, the right square footage. You don't have two lots instead of one. There are some problems that happen. I have gone down and reviewed things for people down the last reappraisal, and they were inaccurate in some of these sheets. In general, they're accurate. But, 95% of the time, they'll be accurate. Probably 5% of the time, there'll be a mistake for one reason or another. And you should make sure that you're not in that 5%. So you'll get your revaluation, you'll call the number that's there, and then you'll go down and you'll get a copy of your new appraisal that's there. Don't call now because they're only a few weeks away from getting the appraisals done, and we want them to concentrate on that. And then once you get that, you can check all the details for accuracies and inaccuracies and point those out to the people that, hey, that you don't have the right information on there. And I know one person was being charged for two lots when he only had one. So you have to look out for that. Then the next step will be, once you get the phone number and you look at it, and then you report any errors, and then if they're not fixed, then you can appeal a second step, and that's to the Board of Assessment Appeals in the town of Winchester. There's a Board of Assessment Appeals. So once you get through the first stage, you've called, you've pointed out your problems, they haven't been fixed, then you go to the Board of Assessment Appeals. If the Board of Assessment Appeals will hear your case within a certain number of days, and then you either they will agree with you that there's some mistakes and they'll fix them, and that may or may not affect your taxes. And then, but if they don't agree with you, then you still have another step, and that is to take legal action. I'm not suggesting you take legal action. I'm just saying that's the next step after the Board of Assessment Appeals. You have to then go into the civil process. Now, I want to make a very strong point to you here that, and people have been caught up in this in the past, they wanted to take legal action, but they hadn't gone through the appeal process properly. And if the appeal process is not followed, then legal action may not be possible. So you want to make sure you understand exactly what that process is if you have any questions, so that you follow it from day one in case you either want to do something illegal or a legal case, or you want to join a class action suit or anything like that. Okay, now the only thing I want to point out about the Pearson School is that the Pearson School, the two things we're dealing with now, and selectmen are going to be dealing with first, are the Americans with Disabilities Act, ADA, and you can go to the ada.gov on the internet if you want more information about them and those violations. They've been pointed out to us. And what they do, the Americans with Disabilities Act, they're the regulations for businesses and state and local governments for dealing with people with disabilities. And you must have certain things if you are, a state or like a city town like us, and you have schools and things like that, public places. You must have certain safety features and for people with disabilities. And we have some violations there that need to be fixed. There's no question about it. They need to be fixed. So it's a question of planning it and doing it and funding it. The next is the Occupational Safety and Health Administration. That's called OSHA. That's www.osha.gov. And if you want any more information about that, you go there. But their mission is to prevent injuries and protect the health of America's workers by ensuring safe and healthful workplaces. So when you go into the town halls and the schools, and the workmen need to be protected as well. So we have a combination of both those, and we have violations that need to be fixed, and we have potential violations that probably haven't been pointed out yet, but that also may need to be fixed over time, and that's where all this planning needs to happen. So now I'm going to switch to, for the last half hour, I'm going to talk about what I wanted to talk about tonight, and that's the beginning of expediting the solution. Because when you're in intensive care, you want some fast service by the best people. You don't say, send me the worst doctor and don't give me fast service when you go into intensive care in a hospital. Matter of fact, your relatives will be there saying, get that person the best care you can, and let's hurry up and get them well and out of the intensive care area. So we need now to look at this, and the first thing I want to point out to you is that the Board of Selectmen, if you read the charter, and you can get a copy of the charter at the town hall. If we can switch to the board now, John. You can get a copy of the charter at the town hall, and we'll be using the thing now, Christine, for quite a while, so we'll just leave it there for now. The policy is what the selectmen, these experienced businessmen that we voted into office, that's what they're there to do. They're there to create the policy for the town and to change the policy or correct the policy or whatever they have to do to be able to run like a business. And that's stated in the charter. That's their responsibility. So what I did was, and everybody always asks you a lot of questions, well, what's policy mean? So I went to the dictionary down at the University Library, and I got us the definition of policy from the Random House Dictionary of the English Language, 2nd edition, unabridged. So if you have any argument with this definition, don't argue with me, argue with the dictionary and whoever made that dictionary down there. But anyway, everybody argues about everything, that's why I have to hedge all these things when I talk. Anyway, definition of policy is a definite course of action. Definite course of action. It says nothing about wishy-washy. Definite course of action adopted for the sake of expediency. Doesn't say adopted for the sake of slowness. It says adopted for the sake of expediency, facility, etc. So I'll just read it all to you. A definite course of action adopted for the sake of expediency, facility, etc. And an example they give in a dictionary is, we have a new company policy. So you're going to expect over the next 6 months lots of new, and I hope quicker, lots of either amended company policies or new company policies. A lot of the company policies we have now probably be quite all right, but they need to be reviewed, they need to be updated, and we need to add where necessary and subtract where necessary. The second thing is, it says it's a course of action pursued by a government, ruler, political party, etc. Well, we're a business, but we're also the government of the town of Winchester, so it applies to us. And it says our nation's foreign policy. Here we would say our town's policy, right? So, and now it's synonymous with strategy, principle, and rule. That comes right from the dictionary. So it's kind of strategic. It's strategic stuff, principle and rule. There's not much room for arguing about minute detail here. And as one of the Republicans said in his running for office on TV, we don't want to sit all night and argue with the lawyers about the definition of is. So that's the kind of thing we're trying to avoid. So that's what policy is all about, and that's what the selectmen are here to do, and that's what they'll do. So what I want to put up now are just what I'm going to cover. I won't get it all done tonight. I only got a half an hour, and I could talk about this for months. But expediting the solution consists of a lot of things. I don't have them all on here, but I'll give you an idea and kind of the order I picked to go through them for our town. If it was a different system or organization or company I was talking to, and I've talked to all sorts, I've probably changed the priorities a little bit. But ours is definitely to get the policy right and make sure it's agreed and it's implemented. And I don't want to talk too much about policy, but we know what we need to do, and we need to do it. Now, non-policy decisions, that's to be delegated. That's to be delegated to the town manager and all his line management. All the management that work for the town manager and all the people that work for them, and then all the consultants they use and anybody involved with any town business will work on the non-policy issues. Now, when they're delegated, providing the people, town manager and the town people and the consultants and everybody involved follows the policy, then the selectmen shouldn't be dipping down in there micromanaging the non-policy area. They need a good, strong town manager. They need to give him the muscle to be able to do the job, and they need to give him the authority, and we'll talk a bit about that here. But that's very important. So I won't dwell on each one of these now because I'm going to go into each one in detail. But anyway, we got policy, non-policy, visibility, feedback, parallel activities, line management, staff relationships, responsibility, accountability, empowerment, decision-making, the 95% rule, results orientation, incentives, the use of committees and the non-use of committees, management by objectives, management by exception, planning. There's a host more that I'll probably be adding from week to week, and especially if somebody calls and wants to talk about any particular one, but there's management, a lot of management things that are involved that I don't have on this list. But now, to some people, this will be second nature in town if they run businesses and they have business backgrounds or they have business school backgrounds. But to the majority of people in town, this will not be second nature, so that's why I'm taking the time to do this program and to talk to everybody about it. So we'll start out with the first one on the list, which is policy. And I just want to synchronize my papers here. So, all right. The Board of Selectmen should deal with policy, planning, and decision-making only. That's very simple. There's not much more to say about it. Preferably, they should make sure that the policies are written down and that they're available to all in town. Anybody who wants to see what they are. If you don't know what the policies are, you can't implement them. Very difficult. And they should make sure that they help educate people as to what the policies are. Talk to people. Go talk to people and explain the policies and answer questions about the policies. So that's very, very important. And then everybody will know, and hopefully they'll be in a little binder with written policy on it, and then we'll know what the policy of the town is. The next point is non-policy decision. The Board of Selectmen should delegate all non-policy planning and decision-making to the town manager. Pardon me, I still have my cold, as you can see, and his direct reports. They, too, should delegate more practically to their people and to any subcontractors or any consultants or anybody who works to help us resolve these issues with the town. Now, once things get down in the non-policy area, the town manager shouldn't have to run to the town every week with a report that talks about these non-policy issues. He should only bring to the selectmen those things where he wants redefinition or reinforcement of what the policies are or clarification of the policies. Meanwhile, he should get on and do the other stuff. And right now, from what I have seen in the past, and maybe my eyes have deceived me a bit, but we deal more with the non-policy decisions at the selectmen meetings in the past than we have with the policy decisions. So I'm very concerned about that, and I'm hoping that we can, and I'm positive that the businessmen will take this approach because they do it all the time in their businesses, and it becomes second nature to them. The third thing I want to mention is once you get this, you need to make it visible to everybody. It's like the Constitution of the United States of America. Anybody can get a copy of it. The Bill of Rights, anybody can get a copy of it. Almost anything that's important like that, you can get a copy of. So, and it's important for people to get it, talk about it, understand it, and then use it as a tool to implement their daily business throughout the town. So I want to put up my next slide here. Switch to Christine again. John, thank you. Gonna blow my nose, so I really want to do that on camera. All policies, objectives, and plans should be published widely for all to see, comment upon, and provide input to the originators. So one of the things when you're trying to get things done rapidly is you need feedback. You need people to tell you and question things and tell you where they think you might either improve these policies or that you might be mistaken and you might not have all the information you needed to make this decision for these policies. So people who do that should be wide awake, always looking for input. And that input can come from anybody. I mean, you'd be surprised what kind of people will give you very, very valuable information when you're trying to do things. It might even be anonymous calls. You know, it doesn't matter. You just take the information, and in mathematics we have a thing called the absolute value of, and I'll draw a little picture quickly with my black pen I bought for this purpose. And the absolute value of A is denoted like this in mathematics, and it means that's the absolute value of A. And whenever I look at anything, when I ask other people to look at things, please look at the absolute value of things. If there are plus A plus and there's A minus, and what we're really interested in is A. And let's keep our eye on the ball. Now, we want people to tell us what they think the pluses and minuses are, but we don't want to get carried away with changing things and make that into a B, right? So it's the absolute value of. So you'll hear me talk a lot about the absolute value of things, and that's what I'll be referring to. So all the policies and objectives should be published widely for all to see. Let's look for comment. Let's go out there and find out what people think of these things, and then let's correct them and improve them where we can. And mechanisms can be set up for that, like just like I set up on my program, an email address and a mailbox, and say, please send me information, and then if I have wrong information, I'll correct it. And if you have new information for me, but I would say to people, please stop sending me camels. I'm getting a lot of camels in the mail, and I'm giving them away, but I don't need any more camels. I made that comment about committees produce camels. Since then, people have been having a lot of fun with it. But thank you very much, but don't send them anymore. The next is feedback. That's very important. Feedback. Good people look for feedback. Any of the great athletes I knew always had managers on hand all the time giving them feedback. Try this, try that, run this way, point your feet that way, do this, do that. And they were very reliant upon that feedback. Good everybody is relying upon feedback. Feedback is Darwinian. Feedback is what helps keep you going in the right direction. And sometimes it's hard to get people's attention when you're in the management business. And one of the points I always like to say is, I could go out and tell everybody they're going to freeze to death in the winter if they don't buy a coat. Or if they go to Alaska, you better buy a coat. And I was with a company when I went to Russia, they bought me a coat, nice big fur coat, because they knew it was going to be colder in Russia than I would have ever figured. Now, nobody ever listens to you when you tell them to buy a coat. What happens is, on the day they freeze, they run down to buy the coat. And usually by then it's too late. So we got to, as managers, keep our ears open and our eyes open, and we have to be able to accept feedback. And I haven't seen much of that around in the last 5 or 6 years. I think that's one of our biggest weaknesses, that we tend to discourage people from feeding back. Parallel activities. This is very difficult for some people to understand, but it's very important to do things in parallel. It's not really, as a manager of a business, it's not good to just do one thing and try to do it right and spend all your time on that. You have to get as many things going in parallel as possible and practical, and start everybody looking at that and working on that. To a certain extent, that's a part of system thinking, which is something I'll talk about in later shows. But it's best to get many things going. So now we have 7 selectmen. If we had 35 issues, we could give each of them 5, and we could say, okay, you be the godfather or godmother for those 5 and get them moving. Or you could say, okay, you be the godmother or godfather for 10, and then you can do 70 in parallel. So the important thing is to get everything moving. That's how you move fast. That's how you expedite the solution. You must be able to work in parallel and things. Now, I'll tell you one of the places I learned how to work in parallel. When I was in high school, I worked at the Conley Inn coffee shop down in Torrington, Connecticut. It's no longer there, but it was a nice coffee shop. And one summer, I worked in there, and there was a guy at the grill, and his name was Steve. I don't know his last name. He was a grouchy guy, but I didn't know his last name. But he was the best short order cook I ever saw in my life. And what happened was, at busy time of day, which was noon, in those days Torrington was bustling at noon, everybody would come in, and there were probably 8 waitresses there, certainly 6 or 7, and they would shout orders at Steve. And Steve would remember every single order without even looking at the waitress. He was frying eggs and making sandwiches and doing things with the grill, but he remembered everything, and he never goofed up an order. He was always right. Often he would give an order to a waitress, and she said, wait a minute, that's not what I ordered. And he said, yes, you did, and in the end, he proved to be right. So, and then when there were slow days, he would say, Brian, why don't you try this? I thought he was crazy, but I tried it, and I began to develop an ability to keep several things going in my mind at the same time that weren't written down, and then I could progress with all these orders. Now, I couldn't do 50 like he could, but I could do 10. And then pretty soon I could do 15. And then I found when I went out into the business world, the higher you get in an organization, say selectman level or town manager level, it's very important that you be able to handle many, many, many things in parallel and be able to switch from one to the other without skipping a beat. So I can't dwell enough on this. There's training that's required. There's a lot of understanding that's required, but it's parallel working is absolutely critical if we're going to be able to get this thing resolved in a relatively short period of time, meaning 3, 4, 5 years. All right, the next point I want to make is that, and this is mainly for definition, this is, most people will know what this is, but for those who don't, we have line management. The line management, below the selectmen, they're the executives. The line management are the people who implement the policies and do all the non-policy work and feedback on the policy and suggest new policies. They can do all that. But their main job is to get on with it and do everything within the policies and get things going and not have to keep running back asking for, can I do this, can I do that, is it okay if I do this, is it okay if I do that? They got to get on with it. They're supposed to be professionals. They know their job better than anybody else, even better than a selectman in a lot of cases. I did misspell a word here, apologize for that. So the town manager, his direct reports, and their direct reports on down. That's the line management. So whenever I talk about line management, that's what I'll be talking about. Now the staff, these are the personnel that are there to assist the line managers and usually have some particular expertise that is very important. And usually a staff relationship is the financial, the personnel, the all the ladies that help with the minutes and help with arrange the manager's time and all that. So there's plenty of people there. They're also very important. But they're the people that assist the line managers so they can do things faster, so they can be more effective. And you know, I got to the point with one little company I had in California where all the vice presidents were sitting on the computer typing their own letters. And I would say to them, hey, that's not for you to do. What you need to do is get out and sell the product or build the product and, you know, help us grow this company. But, you know, getting on the computer is a bit like sticking your thumb in your mouth, you know, sucking your thumb. So it's easier than going out and selling the product. It's easier than actually doing the solution. So we have to make sure we have the staff people to help us, take that burden away from us. And there is a tendency in business world now to get away from that and to load too many small, non-critical issues onto the line managers. And what we're going to try to do, or I'm going to try to suggest we do, is get them out of that and let other people that are better at doing it to do that so they can concentrate on getting us through. Now, the next point I would like to make is responsibility and accountability. Or am I, where am I now? Yeah, responsibility and accountability. Responsibility is fertilizer. Think of it as fertilizer. If you give people responsibility, they will grow. They will learn by doing things, by having responsibility and making decisions, which we'll talk about in a few minutes. So responsibility is good. Now, not all people want responsibility. And I was told by Phil Fellows, I mentioned his name last week on my program, who taught me an awful lot when I was first in the business. He worked for Eddie Rickenbacker of Eastern Airlines, and they put in one of the first big computer systems in the world at Eastern Airlines in Charlotte, North Carolina. He told me, Brian, if you go out and you accept responsibility, people will give you responsibility because they don't want the responsibility. So just go out, and if you go out around the world and you see things, make a decision. You don't have to go back to the headquarters and, you know, and just get out there and make decisions. The hardest thing it is to find when you run a business is people who will accept responsibility and make decisions and get on with things. Now, it also helps, of course, if you make the decisions and accept the responsibility within the policy direction. And I often say that at times I had an engineer working for me that was an expert. Now, I wasn't an expert engineer. And I had a software development expert working for me, and I wasn't a software development expert. But wherever I went, I took those people on my contract with me. And they could be in any part of the world. And they could run into any kind of a problem. And they would know what each other was thinking, what the policy was, what the non-policy approaches that we preferred were, and they could make decisions and accept responsibility. And 95% of the time, they would have made the same decision I would have made. And of course, working together for a while speeds things up because you know how people think. All right. So I want to point out that responsibility is good. It's a fertilizer, and you know, it will help us if people will accept responsibility. Now, if they don't want to accept responsibility, then they got a problem, because this is going to be in a town that for a while there'll be a lot of responsibility delegated to people, and it's all very important stuff that has to be done, so we have to make sure that people do it. Now, coupled with responsibility comes accountability. And accountability is a thing that people are afraid of, because if they accept responsibility and then they have to accept accountability, then we want to make sure that whenever they do something responsible, and if they make a mistake, that we don't hang them, we don't beat them up. You know. Now, I did use the example once on this program of the modern day basketball, and that they make 30, 40 mistakes a game, the best players in the game. And they're not taken out of the game. Sometimes they are, but usually they're not. And they get on and they score 120 points and either win or lose the game. But there's much more tolerance today for excellent people making mistakes than there ever was when I was younger. So we as managers have to realize that people make mistakes and they're not always going to make the right decision. Then you try to correct it, and then of course if they make the wrong decision every time, then you've got a different problem on your hands. So, but most people are pretty intelligent, and if you explain things to them, they will manage. Now, we don't have much time here today, so I guess we got about 5 minutes left. We will go on with a lot more of these things from next week and the following weeks, but I think I have time for one more, and that's empowerment. We need to empower people to make these decisions, accept this responsibility, be accountable. We have to give them the chance to do the job. And then we have to provide them with the air cover, I call it, help them. If they're around the world or somewhere in town and they need help, they should be able to get you on the phone and or come to your office or do whatever and get help. So they will need help. They'll need an awful lot of help. So we need to be able to do that. We need to be able to give it to them. And we need to do it in a positive manner, and we need to develop people and get on. Now, next week when we come back, which the same program will be on tomorrow night. Now, if I'm in tomorrow night, now let's switch to tomorrow night. I won't. I'm recording this program before tonight's selectmen meeting, so this program doesn't have anything to do with what's going to be on tonight. Monday selectmen meeting. So if you're seeing it on Tuesday night, then take it for what it's worth. And then next week when we have it, I'll record it after this selectmen meeting, and in future I'll record it after the selectmen meetings, and I should be able to provide more real-time type information. But this information, no matter what happens at any selectmen meeting, this is still very important. I might have time to cover decision-making. If I don't, and he cuts me off, then I'll redo it next time. But decision-making is critical. It's very important to make a decision than not to make a decision. And when you make the decision, it should be in line with the policies and with all the non-policy rules and regulations that we have to follow the policy. But decision-making is very important. So I always tell people that when I make decisions, I'm going to be a bit like Ted Williams, and I'm from the Ted Williams era, not from the modern. I don't even know who the modern players are, but he only batted 400, maybe 430. He didn't bat 1,000. So it's very difficult to make decisions that are correct all the time. So fear of making the wrong decision should not stop people from making decisions. People should be encouraged to make decisions. The environment should encourage decision-making, not procrastination. And things like, let's pass it off for the town body to agree, is more procrastination when you know the thing isn't right in the first place to even go to the town meeting. So what I'm saying here is, let's step up to the plate as businessmen. Let's make the decisions and not try to procrastinate. It's impossible to make correct decisions every time, no matter how much you deliberate. You can sit and talk about an issue, but the next day you'll find some piece of information that changes your mind if you're open and objective about it. So once a decision is made, the decision maker should always be on the lookout to correct their decision if facts prove this advisable. And if you have any question about that, read A Study in Scarlet by Arthur Conan Doyle. That's the first in the Sherlock Holmes series, and he tells you how he approaches problem solving. And I think you can learn a lot from that. With that, I think that's the end of our program for this evening. Next week we'll start, maybe we'll rehash a little of this, but we'll start with whatever happened at the select meeting tonight and bring you up to date on that, update all our charts and things. And then we will talk about more about expediting solution, and we'll start out with the 95% rule and progress from there. With that, I thank you very much.